Good morning, everybody, and thanks for the opportunity to be here with you today. Okay. So I'm here from WWF. Since September, I've been working there on the new Rhino program. But I'm slightly here wearing two hats today. I was invited to this conference whilst I was still working for Traffic, where I worked with Tom Milliken to produce this report into illegal trade in rhino horn between South Africa and Vietnam. If anyone's interested, you can download the full report here, and I hope, Jean, we can arrange for distribution to attendees afterwards. So I hope I can answer some of the questions from the University of Pretoria around what's happening in end-user markets around rhino horn at the moment. So traditionally, this is a drinking cup made of rhino horn that was used in the ancient Chinese dynasties thousands of years ago. They would take a whole rhino horn and carve it to make a vessel which you could drink liquids out of. And it was believed poisoning was a big problem at that time. And it seemed that alkaloid poisons would react with something in the horn and bubble and indicate that there was a problem in the liquid you were about to drink. So perhaps some of the mythology and reverence that rhino horn still maintains in Asia is linked to this very ancient usage that came about. So rhino horn has also been a prescribed ingredient within traditional Chinese medicine. And in this practice, different animal products or herbs or plant products are prescribed in small quantities mixed together to treat symptoms of an illness. So rhino horn is believed to have a cool, salty, bitter quality. And that means that it can be used to cure the heat from the body. So before people knew about bacteria, before they knew what caused fever, they believed that a cooling ingredient like rhino horn could reduce body heat. So it was prescribed in illnesses to reduce hot blood within the body, to help balance fever, and to eliminate toxins when you're ill. And as I said, it was prescribed in very small amounts in those days, in combination with other herbs and animal products. A Chinese medicine practitioner would have a piece of horn in his shop for many decades, just using very small amounts at a time. And if you look in the traditional Chinese medicine pharmacopoeia, the list of ailments that would be treated by rhino horn would include high fevers, delirium, very severe headaches, things like measles, convulsions, epilepsy, and strokes. But domestic trade in rhino horn was banned in China in 1993 and in most of the consumer countries back in the early 90s. So what we saw during the earlier wave of rhino poaching, as we all know, black rhinos were decimated throughout much of the rest of Africa from the 60s and 70s. And in earlier times, the main markets for horn were in the Far East, in Japan, where it was often sold as part of prepackaged medicine that would contain small amounts of horn. Also in Korea, Taiwan, and China. And since the 90s, domestic bans have been in place in all these countries. And here it was being used medicinally. The other major market previously was in the Yemen, which became a newly rich state associated with the oil rush in the 70s, where the new status symbol for the newly wealthy Yemeni man was to buy a jambia, a dagger to wear on his belt, his traditional wear, and the best possible jambia to have was one with a rhino horn hilt. So much of the demand for rhino horn, particularly the populations that were decimated in Kenya, Tanzania, East Africa, Zambia, was probably for this demand. You can see the close geographical proximity. But we know rhino poaching in South Africa has spiked since the mid-2000s. And what we think is happening in terms of consumer countries, in terms of the end use and the demand, is completely different now. Perhaps there may be some ongoing use in China. Thailand's a question mark, but the big problem at the moment seems to be Vietnam, where something completely different is going on. So, speaking to colleagues, just anecdotal evidence at the moment on the ground suggests that the main users of rhino horn at the moment are, again, a newly wealthy elite social group who are taking it as a rejuvenating, detoxifying tonic for restoring general health following binging. So kind of associated with this detox use in traditional Chinese medicine, but being taken to a whole new level. People will go out, eat lots of rich food, drink too much alcohol, and then gather in a kind of clandestine way in a back room to take some rhino horn and drink it mixed with water in the belief, the very strong belief, that it will purge their bodies of toxins and prevent them being hungover or feeling unwell the next day. And there's definitely definitely very much a luxury good market. So it's people showing not only how wealthy they are, but how well connected they are, because we have evidence that suggests a lot of the political elite are involved in this. So if you can access rhino horn, it means you're rich, but it also means you're well connected. So it's used as a status-conferring gift or bribe. It's almost entered the currency. We've got a report of it being used to pay off part of a car loan. There is still some evidence of the more traditional medicinal linkages. So you can find on internet chat rooms Vietnamese women with small children who still believe that having a small piece of rhino horn at home is what you need in an emergency cure if your child gets a very high fever. The only thing that's guaranteed to make them better is a little bit of rhino horn. And for the first time, it's being advertised as an alleged cure for very serious life-threatening diseases such as cancer. And these seem to be linked to quite sensational urban myths. So there's been various newspaper articles that a politician or his wife or some other relative was very ill from lung cancer or liver cancer or diabetes, and they took rhino horn and it saved their life. So some people think that this might just be some kind of cynical marketing ploy, that by now saying that this product can cure your relative who's fatally ill, not only will you spend the last of your savings, whatever price it takes, in order to deal with this critical situation, it also expands the myth of rhino horn as a cure-all product. So these first two examples of uses have been called by my colleagues on the ground in Vietnam the Ferrari factor. These guys are buying very expensive watches, they're buying very fancy cars, and they're taking rhino horn to show their status. So these are bowls that are being manufactured in Vietnam. They're in varying sizes, and they have a very rough ceramic bottom. And you take a whole rhino horn, and you grind it on the bottom of the bowl, you add a liquid, and then you drink it. And they're being made quite widely and sold quite widely in Vietnam today, and I think that's clearly an African rhino advertised on the front there. So horn's being sold in traditional medicine and meat markets. The internet's certainly playing part in trading of horn now. You can access it through business, and it's talked about on networking sites. As I said, there are definitely political connections, and hospital staff have also been implicated. And there are stalls touting rhino horn around cancer hospitals in Hanoi. But quite a high proportion of the horn that you find for sale on the street is actually fake. It's buffalo horn or made out of other, actually quite poor quality replicas. This Teg Yak, the words at the bottom mean rhino horn in Vietnamese, and this was a poster outside a badminton racket shop in Hanoi. So what's happening in Vietnam? Why is this suddenly spiking out there now? Esmond Bradley Martin was there 10 years ago and found no evidence of rhino horn use in Vietnam at that time. But like the Yemen in a way, it's a country that's undergoing very massive economic growth. People have disposable income for some of the first time. It's very much a nation of face culture, so there's not a strong individualistic approach. If your friends are doing something, you do it too. If the way to prove your status is to take rhino horn and share it with your friends, then you become part of that community, and it's something we need to be culturally sensitive about when dealing with this issue. It's the 13th largest nation with 87 million people, and it's growing very rapidly. 2/3 of the population are under 35. So Vietnam, until 2010, was also a rhino range state. In the late 1980s, maybe 12 or 15 individuals were found in an area that was later proclaimed the Cat Tien National Park. In 2010, the last rhino was found shot with its horn cut off. So why are we pointing the finger at the Vietnamese, and what is their link to South Africa? We know about the increase in poaching since 2006, 2008, but the indications, but the Vietnamese have actually been using every method they can to get horn out of South Africa and into the country. So since 2006, you can see if you look at the black line, so from 2004 2005, the dark green is the traditional nationality of hunters, so people from the States or from Europe. The black line is Vietnamese hunters, and the light paler green is other Asian or non-traditional hunters. So you can see how non-traditional hunters moved into this market to be able to export legal horn, and at the same time rapidly pushed up the price of a hunt, pricing out the traditional hunters out of the market. And if we look at what happened to that horn, the dark green line is the CITES records of exports of horn from South Africa to Vietnam. The black line is the CITES records that Vietnam admitted importing horn from South Africa, and the pale green line is their own records in Vietnam of imports of rhino horn. So trade in rhino horn is ostensibly illegal in Vietnam, but it is possible to own it as a personal effect if you import illegal horn. There's still government denial of widespread use, and there's very limited evidence of seizures or arrests and prosecutions. What can we do about this, in brief? We're pushing for the signing of a memorandum of understanding around law enforcement and biodiversity cooperation between South Africa and Vietnam, and particularly pushing for that being operationalized and joint actions being put into place. We're pushing for more quantified research on what's actually going. The information we have at the moment is anecdotal. It's just stories from the ground. We're going to run a consumer research market survey with a reputable agency in Vietnam to try and get quantified data about who is buying the horn and where from, what they're paying for it, and what they're going to do with it. This I can talk to people about if they're interested in more detail later, but it's the new 5-point plan that we've put together at WWF South Africa to address this problem, based on resilient populations of rhinos, community buffers, investigations and prosecutions within South Africa, and then building bilateral cooperation between South Africa and the end-user market, and understanding the trade and demand from there. Thank you.
I acknowledge that our program is jam-packed. I will take only one question, and then during tea we can interact further with our speakers. I'll be taking one question for Dr. Shaw. No question. Thank you.
Thanks, Dr. Shaw. That was great. I was just wondering if they've started any sensitization programs in Vietnam, or what sort of things are being implemented there yet, or are you still waiting for the MOU to be signed?
There are some small NGOs doing stuff on the ground, but because there's so much unknown about who's using this and why, it's dangerous to try and reduce demand before you understand what's driving it. You could have unintended consequences. So that's what's happening first.
Okay, thanks.